Hi, I'm Mike Dilk and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family and your friends. Each week I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me with this week's Relax Back UK show. This week's topic is food intolerance and the issues that it can cause. Now, many people suffer from gurgling guts, bloating, gripe, gaseous stomach, bellyache, whatever you call it. It can be anything from mildly unpleasant to something that really does affect your life. And it's not just guts. Food intolerance can affect different aspects.
Look at making small changes. So some of the changes were instead of white rice, have brown rice or wild rice. Instead of potatoes, have sweet potatoes, and just try and make a few changes to your diet. And within 2 weeks, my eczema had completely lifted.
I spoke with Jack Sullivan, a director at West Ham Football Club and a joint owner of Supply Life, and also Ricky Singh, the founder of Supply Life. And what they do is use a blood test to find foods that people may be intolerant to, which will get the immune system into action.
Often we get clients that will have some antibodies for a particular protein, but that's fine. Those foods will still remain in the green and you could still consume them. But the ones that were like this high elevated amounts of antibodies that bind to that particular protein, it means literally that your body sees it as a severe threat.
So please do stay tuned for a great show. Thank you.
This show is cool!
So the guests today are Ricky Singh, founder of Supply Life, and Jack Sullivan, a joint owner of Supply Life. We started off talking about gut issues and irritable bowel syndrome. Now, everyone has had gut issues at some stage, but for many people, it's a problem that they have to deal with a lot of the time, kind of most of the time. So I asked first, how many people really do have persistent gut issues and or irritable bowel syndrome, IBS?
That's a good question. There's multiple studies, or you could see like new stats have come to light and they're widely available online. They're now saying like 1 in 3 people suffer with some form of IBS, whether it's constipation or whether it's diarrhea. Or a mixture of both. But I think we're at that point in our life where people are so busy and we become so convenient based where they think it's normal. So I often speak with a lot of clients thinking going to the bathroom twice a day is normal to them, thinking it's okay because their metabolism has burned their food a lot quicker. But if I ask them how many meals they've had 2 meals in one day. And whatever they've consumed, the body's rejecting it and doing its best to kind of get the food out of their system, which would lead to maybe having diarrhea. In some cases, it gives them a bloated tummy or a stomach. And that's all those symptoms which people think it's not a problem, but it is a problem. It's an alarm. Your body is telling you that what you've put in your system, I want to get out a lot quicker than the 24 to 48 hour window, which gives it time to absorb the nutrients. So yeah, like a lot of people suffer and struggle with their gut health. Like if I was to first to ask you the question there, how often have you had lunch and after your lunch you've just felt that slump and just felt tired and lethargic? How often does that happen to you?
Oh, well, that's quite frequent. But is that not necessarily a problem with the guts? It's probably more to do with what I'm eating, isn't it?
Exactly that. And like, whereas your body should be looking at that food or that fuel that you've put into your body as an energy source, it's an immune response that your body's been triggered by the proteins from that food. And it's raised almost like an alarm bell in your system to be like, right, let's isolate everything into your gut so it doesn't spread anywhere. Your gut then becomes bloated. And then what tends to happen when it becomes bloated, those proteins from the food that you have consumed leak through from your gut into your bloodstream, and then your body's using all its energy to kind of get that food out of your system. And this is where almost like you get that post-lunch fatigue. And then 9 out of 10 times people will rush for a coffee, like almost like a pick-me-up. Sometimes people put sugar in there, which sugar doesn't help your gut health, but it's a vicious cycle then. And then you find then that the average person that does consume that coffee just after lunch, their sleep cycle then gets affected later on, and it's basically on repeat the following day.
Sure.
But yeah,
So
it's a lot of
is all this irritable bowel syndrome, or is irritable bowel syndrome, if you like, a subset of some of the gut issues that people have?
I think IBS, or I think to be precise, IBS is a blanket word in the sense of we do suffer with some form of symptoms that come from IBS. So whether it's a case of bloating, whether it's a case of diarrhea, whether it's a case of just having post-lunch fatigue,
Flatulence.
Yep.
Flatulence, yeah. Thank you, Jack. Don't feel left out, Jack. Join in. You join in with a bit of flatulence whenever you want, Jack. It's fine. I'm not meaning to ignore you.
But yeah, like it's all these signals that are coming from your gut is purely down from the food that you have consumed. And all we have to do is make smarter choices and be a bit more smarter with our choices as well. So like, if you look at, there's a percentage of people would think of gluten being an issue. So the first thing they'll do is they'll cut out bread, for example, and which is great because you take bread out in today's version of bread is like, it's like almost like 20 different ingredients. Bread should have been, or bread should be what it used to be: salt, flour, yeast, and it's baked. So you take the bread out, and then people start going to, let's say, a gluten-free option, and it's processed with 20 other different things, which is harder for your body to recognize. But if you were to like have maybe a baked potato or some rice as a form of carbohydrate, it's only going to make your digestive system work more efficiently to recognize what you've consumed and therefore process that or digest that food more efficiently to give you that energy that your body requires.
Yeah, I mean, we can come on to different types of foods and what have you, but what I want to ask specifically about is kind of diagnosis. So occasionally people feel a bit unwell, have a gut problem, move on, don't worry about it, and we'll be fine. But if these things continue and someone wants to get a diagnosis because they're concerned, what can they do? They can give their doctor a call, make a doctor's appointment, and what is there a process?
Sure. Now, my journey, so for me, going back best part over 10 years ago now, when I was diagnosed with IBS from my GP, there wasn't much of a solution. Credit to my GP that he said, look, you know what, you do have gut-related issues, but there wasn't really a solution. So it was the case of you go out, you go back to basics, you try to avoid the foods that give you the triggers. Yes, you can go and speak to your GP and they'll diagnose you with IBS, but the GP doesn't really spend a lot of time in their education process learning about nutrition. So with our process, with Supply Life, yes, we can test the individual. We can test their blood sample, test it against the 209 foods that we test for, and give them a full breakdown of what foods are triggering their immune response to see those foods as threats.
Yeah. Okay, so is this very new? A very new approach. The reason I asked that is because I like to do a bit of digging around before I talk to people, and I looked at the NHS website just before we chatted, and it said actually there is no test for IBS. The GP might do a few things, but there's no definitive test.
I think from me, Mike, and from what we've and our sort of examples of when we're dealing with clients, there potentially is no reason for IBS no test for IBS because it's a blanket number of reasons. So a lot of the time, as you said, it's food related, and the doctor will say try and cut out the foods that are causing your triggers, and that happens quite widely and quite a lot. What our test can sort of do is it with a lot of meals now, as you'll know, let's say you go to a restaurant or let's say you go and have a normal meal, there's normally 10 things on your plate, whether that's garlic, there's this, there's that, there's lots and lots of things where our test, so for someone to try and work out and not cut out 10 foods at a time because they've had, I don't know, spaghetti bolognese with cheese, then they're not cutting out all of those foods. Our test almost highlights saying, okay, it's one of these 6 or 7 foods, I'm going to cut those foods out and then see if I see an effect. So instead of potentially cutting, I don't know, spaghetti bolognese out of their diet, they're only cutting out the Parmesan cheese, for example, if that makes sense. And then they're seeing if that improves things. And then I think as well, alongside our test, as Ricky mentioned, we offer up to 30 days of support. So with our nutritionist, and we've just actually appointed a dietitian as well. So it's not just our test, but it's also our process of people being able to speak to a nutritionist for half an hour to speak about what foods they're having, what issues they're suffering from. And then it's also how they then get that 30-day support and the meal plan that we offer and we put together for people to try and make that transition. And I think you'll see from our reviews online that most people see really, really positive changes and positive effects and feel a lot better and feel, to be honest with you, Mike, a lot more maybe doesn't solve their IBS, but they feel a lot more in control of it because they then start to really understand what is triggering their foods or triggering their symptoms and what foods are doing that. And I think that's the big thing for us is it's almost, we're not solving IBS, but we're trying to help people manage it and almost solve it, if that makes sense. The bottom line
it makes perfect sense. And actually on the NHS website, it does say this was last reviewed in February 2021. And I get the feeling that this approach is quite newer than that.
Yeah, so to be honest, the business has really since 2021 has really boomed, and I think we've been lucky in the sense that people are a lot more aware of, or they're a lot more comfortable doing home testing and things like that. And to be honest, it's not just the test, but it's the whole process that we think makes us really, really stand out. And we've worked with Premier League footballers, Olympians, boxers, England cricketers, who have all suffered from a large range of symptoms, who we've worked with and sort of gone through the process with. So that's
okay. So tell us about the process. Either of you, Jack or Ricky, the process, you have to give some blood. So the blood is tested. So you do that at home. How do you get the blood out of you and to your lab?
Yeah, so I'll do, I'll explain it in simple terms, and then Ricky can add a bit more detail and a bit more meat to the bone. But it's for a consumer like me, and when I first did it, I suffered from eczema, and it got rid of my eczema within 2 weeks of getting my results by cutting out the foods. But basically, it's a very simple home test kit. It's a quick prick of the finger and 3 or 4 droplets of blood into a tube. It gets sent to our lab in Cambridge. Our lab in Cambridge analyzes the blood. Ricky will go into more detail on how they do that.
So Jack, you started off being a user. By the sounds of things, you're now an investor, are you? You say
yes.
Our lab. You're involved.
Yeah. So that's exactly how it happened. So what happened was,
you liked it so much you bought the company. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, not too far off the truth. So I basically, what happened with me was Ricky came down and tested all of the West Ham women's team. My past role at West Ham was with the West Ham women's, and there was one test left, and I at the time was suffering very badly from eczema, and I was going to my GP. And my GP was doing a great job, and they were giving me creams and things like that, but they couldn't really work out why it was happening. I took this test sort of as a hit and hope, thinking, look, I've got nothing to lose type thing.
Yeah.
I got sent my report back, had my call with Ricky actually at the time, and Ricky said, oh, just look at making small changes. So some of the changes were instead of white rice, have brown rice or wild rice. Instead of potatoes, have sweet potatoes, and just try and make a few changes to your diet. And within 2 weeks, my eczema had completely lifted, and it felt like I don't know, it felt like for me at the time was a big weight lifted off my shoulders.
Well, let's face it. I mean, bad eczema ruins people's lives, and those changes that you suggested, brown rice instead of white rice, it's not that hard, is it? Really?
No, and I think for me that was the thing, and where I was having plates and plates of foods, and I was having 10 different ingredients, and my eczema would flare up. I was thinking, well, what 10 is it on that plate? Where with this, well, with our test, we try and make the results very, very easy for the consumer to understand. And
all right, I want to go into the nitty gritty of the test. So maybe I'll pull Ricky in again.
Yes.
The drops of blood come to the lab. What are you looking for in the drops of blood?
Fab. So when the sample, so just kind of make it a lot easier. A lot of people have seen like a diabetes test, for example. So the pinprick process is like that, but rather than giving one drop of blood to kind of measure your bloods for a diabetes test, you're giving like 4 to 5 large drops of blood. That then goes to the laboratory over in Cambridge. They'll centrifuge the sample. They'll separate your plasma and serum. And then what they have is a microarray. On this array, it'll have the individual proteins of each ingredient. Now, using ELISA technology, ELISA has been used for quite a while. We measure the immunoglobulin, which is IgG 1, 2, 3, and 4, just so you understand that's your pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory responses.
Yeah. And so this is something that the body makes as part of the immune process. If it's kicked, if it receives something it doesn't like, it makes this as part of the immune process. Yeah.
Correct. So, and that's exactly it. So with this microarray, we'll have the individual proteins. And if there's antibodies that bind to the particular protein, we'll then measure if it's elevated amounts or a reduced amount. Now, your body can produce antibodies at a small level for the particular protein, but your body can deal with that. So let's say, for example, this often we get clients that will have some antibodies for a particular protein, but that's fine. Those foods will still remain in the green and you can still consume them. But the ones that were like this high elevated amounts of antibodies that bind to that particular protein, it means literally that your body sees that as a severe threat. So therefore, when you do consume that particular protein, your body then is working twice as hard to kind of deal with the food that you have consumed. Okay. And in that instance, that individual, if they have got, let's say, a very restricted diet, so let's say the average person should be eating at least 30 to 35 different foods per week. Let's just say, for example, they are waking up and doing toast and butter, a bowl of cereal and milk, lunchtime maybe grabbing a sandwich. They start eating just very simple like white grains, processed foods. They're not getting a good variety. And the goal for us with our whole team is, one, getting the client to be eating whole foods. But from the test side of things, we use all the foods that didn't create a massive response. So therefore,
right. So how many foods are you checking for to see if they're making it? You mentioned it before.
Yeah, we test for 209 individual ingredients.
209.
So 209. And
okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, it covers a wide range. So like we're looking at things like not just egg, we're looking at egg white, egg yolk. When we're looking at milk, we're looking at cows, sheep, goats, buffalo milk. So there's a good variety that's out there. So the goal is to make this easy for the end user. And I think like we don't want to stress the individual out. We want to make this process as easy as possible and make sure when they see the report, it's black and white. Okay, cool. Can't use white potato, use sweet potato, use cassava. There's different grains. So if you want to use quinoa, for example, it just encourages people to get a wider variety of diet. And it obviously more importantly so is improve their gut health.
Okay, so all that makes perfect sense. I have to say, I've got a question which may well show I'm not a scientist, all right, by the way. Actually, I'm a civil engineer. I do have some smattering of kind of basic knowledge. And I know everybody's immune system is actually slightly different. So we have different levels of whatever our immune system makes to combat different things. And I know we do have different levels of immunoglobulin G. So we all have different base levels. So what might be high for me might be actually pretty low for you. So there's no sort of real average that everyone should have. So how do you get around that? Because that seems like it might be a bit of a problem.
So, like I said to you earlier on, we test IgG 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you got your pro-inflammatory and the anti-inflammatory. And on our, like I said to you earlier on as well, you can have antibodies for a particular protein, but if it's high levels, so like in our results, you'll see like you'll see your foods that are in green, foods that are in amber, foods that are in red. So to answer your specific question, yes, everyone has individual levels of antibodies and immune responses, and more importantly, immunology in the sense of your immune system. But in regards for the specifics of that, we see that in the test results. And if you are producing high levels of antibodies, your body sees that as a threat. So it's not the case of yours is different to mine. Yes, it's the case of we have a different immune system, but if you're producing antibodies for a particular protein, it means your body, depending obviously again how severe that reaction is, your body still sees that protein and as a threat. And that's only because those proteins are leaking through from your gut into your bloodstream.
Okay. All right. So it is possible to kind of generalize and give people this ideas of things that it might be sensible to cut out, as indeed happened with Jack and yourself. You know, you're a
Yes.
sufferer. That's what set all this off.
Exactly. So like, and I suffered for many years. So like, and it wasn't until like one, I sorted my gut health out, and being someone that had enough time on their hands to go and study nutrition, I was just fascinated that making small changes had some great results. And Jack was a prime example as well. When I met Jack and when we did his test, it was looking at his results. It was just a case of making small, simple changes. There's other clients we've helped as well that couldn't get rid of unwanted weight. They've had PTs, they've done everything that they've can. And again, by giving them a diet that's more based on them and on how they do things, and more importantly, how their body responds, there's been many clients have lost that kind of that inflammation or that unwanted weight because your body holds water when it is inflamed. And like when you are consuming inflammatory foods on a daily basis, naturally you are going to be that kind of individual where you just can't get rid of some weight just purely because the food that you're putting in your system is telling your body to hold on. We've got inflammatory foods coming in. We need to protect. We need to protect.
So are you checking, and is there a difference for allergies or intolerances? Because I must admit, when I was trying to read up about this beforehand, I got thoroughly confused on what the difference is, indeed, if there is one.
Sure, and there's a massive difference between an IgE response, which is your anaphylaxis, so someone that has a severe allergy, and then you got an IgG response, which is a sensitivity. And the difference between two is one is life-threatening, which is an allergy, and intolerance then is sensitivity, which again you will have issues with, but again it's not as severe as an allergy.
Okay, all right, okay. And it seems like it's quite common. From the sheet that came out, it said the typical Brit lives with 15 different intolerances. Now, I read that and I thought, I don't believe that.
Do you know what? It was interesting. So like we looked at some stats over 20,000 people, and looking at the averages in the Western, and again these stats are based on UK individuals, and it's probably 99.9% of people which are British individuals, and we have had people in those stats that have moved into the country, but fundamentally that average of 15 intolerance is common. We have seen a difference.
Are these not people that have done your test though? So like they're a subgroup of people that have got problems. Oh, I think I'll take the test. So they're not typical. They're people that have taken your test.
I think to be honest with you, correct. But I do think we have a large range of why people do the test. So some people just do it because they've got issues, and then other people do it purely because they just want to feel a bit better. They're interested to find out what might make them feel better. As we said, we work with a lot of athletes as well that don't potentially have any symptoms, but are always striving to be 1% better as well. So yeah, no, that's probably true as well, Mike.
So I mean, this strikes me as potentially very useful, very interesting, but I do have a slight concern. So if you think, oh, I'm pretty healthy, I'll take the test, it might be interesting, and you come back with a whole load of things that, well, perhaps you should eat less of this, can it lead to people being worried about what they eat and all the time, because actually that can lead to some quite serious medical problems of, people not eating enough, starving themselves, and very
I
peculiar
think,
kind of food habits, which aren't very
yeah,
healthy.
And
yeah,
and that's the sorry. And this is where obviously like we got nutritionists and we got a dietitian. We talk about obviously eating enough and eating. It's not about ignoring the foods. This is where we give the 30-day support from our nutritionists that help the individual. And like again, going back to your question about when people cutting foods out, 9 out of 10 times when people use alternatives, because it's not about cutting foods out, it's about replacing them with better foods,
Right.
they will feel better for it. So like, and again, I'll say this to everyone that's listening, it's not about cutting foods out, it's about replacing them with better choices. Like what we did with Jack, it's not the case of, if for him it was potato was an issue, so we replaced white potato with sweet potato. So it wasn't a burden, it wasn't a difficult change, it was
Do you
easily
like
available.
sweet potato, Jack?
I love sweet potato.
Just as well. Sorry, I interrupted.
I think as well, Mike, the one thing we do say as well is we always say, and our nutritionists say, cut these foods out as much as you can, but there's going to be some scenarios where, look, if you want to have a roast dinner, or you want to have something, then obviously, look, you deserve to have a treat, but you will probably see a reaction off the back of it, and that's sort of what we say. And look, we know in a modern world and a modern life that it's difficult to make all of these changes all the time. But we're saying, look, if you can make these changes as much as possible, then you will see the benefits, really.
Yeah. Okay. So, you've seen the benefits yourself, Jack. Ricky, I'm assuming it's worked for you.
Day and night difference. I'll send you a before and after of me, where I used to just consume an everyday diet, and I'll show you how I looked just by making smart choices. And I've gone older, but I've almost like, for me, I look younger just by making the correct changes. My skin's a lot better, feel a lot better. I'll send you the before and after. You can have a look, and then you can give us your opinion.
Okay. All right. I certainly will. So, Jack, you work with professional athletes. You've spoken about some professional athletes doing these tests. Have you noticed improvements in their performance?
Yeah. So to be honest with you, we've been working with the men's team over the last 3 years, and or last 2 years, and their results have been good. They've won a trophy, and we've at West Ham, and then we've also worked with quite a few boxers and things like that as well. I think what we worked with some other Premier League football clubs. One Premier League football club we spoke to, they actually changed their pre-match meal because they realised that quite a few of the players had quite similar, all the same intolerance, and they thought that might make a difference in their pre-match because the players might feel bloated before they go out. And I think where you're dealing with 1%, I think they just thought it'd be a wise move just to as Ricky said, not replace the food, but just change the food slightly. So
Yeah.
I think they were serving rice to all of the, and they realised that a lot of the players, I think half the squad were intolerant to rice, so they just moved that to wild rice, which the players didn't. I don't think they even noticed, but it's just all of those small changes and the 1% that might help.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is very interesting because you're moving there from someone just feeling a bit better in their life to actually big business. Football is big business. If your team as a whole performs 1% better, that could easily be the difference between winning and losing. And in professional football, this is a big deal. Potentially,
yeah. And that's the hope, to be honest with you. And I think what we always say is if someone necessarily doesn't have really, really strong symptoms, then we might not we might not be of mass use. But we've had one athlete come to us recently, and he was crying out, and he's just been given his results. He actually suffered badly from IBS, and he's seen a big difference and a big change. And to be honest with you, he just said he feels a lot more confident when he goes out on the pitch, that not like he does. He's not got belly issues. He's not got his belly grumbling, his belly aching, and he can go out there with a complete clear head. And he's seen a big improvement as well.
Interesting. All right.
There's also
look,
there was a study done as well back in 2017 on athletes. It was done. I think I'm pretty sure it was done over in Italy at the time. And again, they had a group of athletes where they monitored their diet pre and obviously then they did a similar test. And then again, it was the case of they changed their diet for 3 months and they did see a massive improvement in their digestive system and their body composition and their fat, the body fat percentage had reduced as well. And like on that study again, it showed making those changes, there was an improvement. And you can measure obviously your C-reactive protein, where it's like an inflammation marker in your body that had also decreased as well by making those changes.
This is very interesting. This I can think of many more questions. This could almost become a mini series, but we haven't really got enough time for it just now. So we're going to have to wrap it up there, guys. But my last question, I think, to probably to Ricky, is if people are listening to this and thinking, God, this is actually quite interesting. I'd like to find out a bit more. What are some good sources that people can go to?
You can head over to our website, supplylife.com. There's a lot of information on there. You can also email us some questions. But again, if you really want to kind of like do some more homework on it, you can go online. There are various different studies available online, which you could read. And obviously, again, there was one done at York University. It's an old study, but even in that study, there was a group of 5,000 people that had entered this study. And even on that study alone, 80% of people saw an improvement. And that's an old study. And that was an old method of testing. Science has come further, testing has become more efficient and more accurate. And again, if even based on that study with 5,000 people on an old testing method, there's an 80% improvement. You can only imagine now with better technology, better ways of testing, it's only going to be better for the individual.
Good. All right. Look, thank you very much indeed for chatting, you guys. Absolute pleasure. And I found it very interesting.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I've actually done the blood test myself. It was very easy to do, very easy to take the blood and get it sent to the lab. What I would say is make full use of the backup they provide. Talk with a nutritionist. Don't just cut out foods that the results might say you have an intolerance to without some very good advice from a professional person that knows what they're talking about. I think that's probably the way to go. Thank you very much to Ricky Singh and Jack Sullivan of Supply Life for being such great guests. Thank you to you for listening and have a healthy week. Until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week. Until next week.